Hi, everyone. It's Thursday, October 4th, 2018 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Higher Ed Live Special Edition. I'm your host, Erin Spinka, and on today's live broadcast, we're talking about non-traditional students, particularly working adults, and why they should be a target audience of your marketing and enrollment efforts. Higher Ed Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Be part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. You can participate in today's discussion by tweeting us using hashtag HigherEdLive. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the video archives at higheredlive.com, or you can take Higher Ed Live on the road with you by subscribing to the podcast. So if you have to duck out a little bit earlier today or can't stay for the whole show, don't worry. You'll be able to catch up on the archive later in just a few hours. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. You're on your way to becoming an experience mapping expert. You've got the tools, but now it's time to put them into action. When you understand what information your target audience is looking for, when they're looking for it, how they're searching, and why, you're able to identify areas for improvement in engagement, content creation, and so much more. Enter the M. Stoner Experience Map Workshop. They'll teach your team how to use experience mapping methodology to improve your marketing and communications, and you'll receive a fully customized experience map. Once you empathize with their experiences, you can create and deploy content to enrich their user journey. We'll be tweeting out a link to that workshop in just a few seconds. Today by Beth.
I'm sorry, did we freeze?
Doyle, Vice Patient Services. We were having a little earlier today, so we just want to make sure everything's still good. You still can hear me okay?
I can. You froze there for a second. So.
All right. I think we're back.
Okay.
Where she ensures at Kale, higher education is focusing on the needs of adult students through inclusive marketing, flexible programming, compassionate student support, and offering credit for learning from work and life experience. For over 12 years, Beth has worked directly with Kale's highest level clients and partners to raise awareness of Kale and its mission to provide marketing, consulting services, and training. She also has 20 years of experience in brand building, marketing, and public relations, so she knows her stuff. I'm excited to have you join me today, Beth. And again, just a quick reminder to our viewers, we are having a little bit of technical trouble, so bear with us if we have a couple of back and forth blips, but we're pushing ahead like planned.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we were talking a little bit before we went live, and it's, to me, obvious you have a passion for adult learning and making sure that higher education in particular is catering and marketing and focusing on them in their enrollment efforts, campus life experiences, etc. What brought you to this particular focus? What's the kind of the behind the scenes story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so, an adult student is really somebody who is working and usually attending part-time and financially independent. And I was one of those people. So I actually went out of high school, I went into a community college, and I got a certificate, not a degree, in advertising design, actually. It's a marketer. And I got a job right away. That worked out. I got a job right away. But then, of course, several years later, I really couldn't move forward in my career unless I had a bachelor's degree. So I went back at the age of 31. And I had some interesting experiences on that journey. I went to schools where I just literally could not sign up for classes because they only happened during the day and I was working full time. So I ran into, a lot of obstacles, but then I also found a school that did cater to my needs. And it made a huge difference. And after I got my degree is when I found this job. I applied at Kale for this job about 12 years ago, actually. I was started out in the marketing department at Kale. And as soon as I saw and really understood what their mission was, I was like, hey, that's me. That's exactly me. And also, all my siblings don't have a college degree, so it's still very relevant to me in my life and the people that I care about.
And I think it's only increasingly more relevant to society as a whole. I mean, I'm blank. I tried to find it today, and naturally, of course, I couldn't. There was a study I was reading earlier, or a news article earlier this year, about, when we think of students that are looking to go to college, we think of the 17, 18-year-old, like in the episode description, where they just have piles of mailers and all these things. And, they're sitting around talking with their parents and their friends and their peers about where they're going to go to school after high school. And yet that's not what the incoming class looks like anymore. It's not, 95% 17, 18-year-olds. So
Now,
can you talk a little bit about kind of how that change, how you've seen that change over the past few years, and if you've noticed it's, increasingly more
yeah,
diverse?
right. Well, I mean, adult enrollment has definitely increased over the last, couple decades, really. And it's now gotten to the point where, yeah, the majority of students don't fit that description, particularly if you're talking about a student who's going to be living on campus, and, not working and attending school full time. I think the latest number I saw, that was only 17% of college students. So even the ones that are younger are still often holding down a job while going to school. But then, yeah, there's probably a good 50% that are maybe working full time and attending part time. And I think it's about 25% that actually have children of their own. So yeah, it's not what people think when they think college student, but it is the reality of the majority of people.
And so you've kind of already dove into it, but what is the definition of working part-time, working full-time, attending parents, like what in your organization's mission and your personal definition, what does an adult student look like in this day and age?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we do our research reports, we'll use the 25 and up age bracket as a kind of rule of thumb. But really, when we think about adult students, we think about them as anyone who cannot engage with higher education in a traditional way, and therefore need a different approach. And so that can be, as I said, if you have somebody who is 19 but they have to work full time and go to college, then that person is facing the same challenges as somebody who's 32 and doing the same thing. Right. So it has to do about the other things that are competing in their life with education, the limitations of their schedule to participate in things, the fact that they might not be present on a campus. Maybe they're attending fully online. They may not be engaged with the social culture on a campus. And that all becomes really important stuff. If you think about going to a website for a college, and if all you see on there is pictures of the football game and this and that, and all the social activities, an adult sees that basically says, this is not for me, right? I'm not one of those people that can go that way. So this doesn't fit me.
I'm personally looking at master programs, and that's something that, consistently, even just trying to figure out if there's an online element, because I would most likely, if I work at a higher education institution, and one of the top choices naturally is my own school's master program. But if I would go somewhere else, it would most likely have to be an online degree. And it's fascinating how difficult it is to find that information, despite the fact that, it's programs like marketing and communications and PR and, emerging media. And it's not just something that they thought about, or I don't know if they just assume that I already know or what, but it's very challenging. And I have to say, as a person kind of going through this experience, it turns me off to their program pretty darn quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm working on my doctorate now online, and yeah, I had to go to one that was going to be very conscious of my work life, or I never would have made it. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's the struggle, is that they're digging around. When people are looking to go back and they've got these competing priorities, they're digging around, they're looking for stuff, and they're not seeing a lot of those supports. And I think a lot of what happens is that some institutions have just sort of gotten used to, this is how it's always been. We had these traditional age students come in. Our pathway into our master's programs are coming from, our high academic achieving, you know, bachelor's degree students. So there's this like idea of this being a straight path, and it simply is not, for most people at all. And so that's kind of difficult, I think, sometimes for institutions to adjust to. And you also have a lot of people that are at institutions and making these decisions who had a very traditional journey themselves, right? So it's not easy to be a working adult and earn your doctorate. So it makes sense that a lot of people who have doctorates who work in higher ed maybe didn't take that path, right? They had more of a traditional path. And many of them, this is not to like badmouth them. There are many, many, I've run into many people that care about this a great deal. And then, of course, there are those people that took the path of doing it as an adult, and they're really champions for it. But it is a big change, it's a big shift in how you think about how you set up your programs. And everyone's at a different place in the continuum in terms of doing that.
Um, it's it's been very fascinating to me because as an undergraduate, I was a commuter student, and kind of to the point you just said, people didn't. 70% of students lived on campus, and so whenever all of the administrators at the time had generally traditional pathways, like you mentioned, through their own education process. But as soon as that kind of shook up a little bit, and there were people that came in that, had just completed their PhD or their master's, and they had, gone back to school 10, 15 years later, the commuter program and all of the resources for commuters got way better. And so it's like, I was like, oh, this is nice. Wow. Like there's like all of the free giveaways and things like that where, when I was off campus working, and then different leadership came in, and you started to see, oh, hey, like they know that I work from X, or that generally there's a population that works these hours and they can't get to campus for the free giveaways. And so they miss out on this stuff, and, they do want to be part of it. So I find I have a lot of experience with that kind of exact, you see someone come, how quickly things, yes, it was small things like that. It wasn't like a drastic campus-wide change, but it was a small step in what seemed to be a more inclusive and open direction. And what does that success look like? Like, yes, I got free food and like sweatshirt giveaways, but that's not the only thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the worst part is that adult students have much lower graduation rates. So, that's a problem that has to be solved. It has to be solved really for our whole economy, quite frankly. If we have a whole set of people that we're just going to kind of say, well, they're left behind and it's too late for them. We're thinking about the future. As our economy is changing and requires people with higher levels of education, like we just have to make it more inclusive. So the things really do align with how do you provide student support services that actually align with the needs of adults. So, we find this a lot, like things that are very important to adults, like career services that might be offered on campus, are only offered from 9 to 5, so they can never go. Even availability of help for financial aid, or library staff or whatever. So some of it is timing and scheduling, is a big issue. Availability of classes, as I mentioned, is a big issue, especially as an institution is trying to transition to having more online and evening classes. But if they still have a few key ones that you absolutely have to go to during the day, that's not going to work. So people get stuck with that. There's also, we have, actually a list of 10 principles for institutions that want to better serve adults. And they're in these areas: career transitions, student support services, teaching and learning. That's also an important aspect. Teaching an adult is a little bit different than teaching someone who might be younger. Someone who's used to a high school environment and is coming in without any experience, they might be, okay with more lecture, although really nobody's that great at a whole lot of lecture, but there might be a more amenity to a kind of top down giving of knowledge, right? When you have somebody, when I went back to school, I had been working in marketing for 10 years. You're taking a marketing class, you've been working in marketing for 10 years, you're going to have opinions. You're going to have a lot of opinions about things, and you're going to fight about it, with your faculty. And the really great faculty who do this well, they embrace that. In the program that I'm in now, the faculty will say to me, well, I guess you just know more than me on this, like, it's that sort of openness to like, oh, it's great. I'm always learning things from you. You know more about it than I do, which is part of the equation. It's finding, as a faculty member, what is the missing piece that this person doesn't know that they need to know, while respecting what they already do know, right? And that also brings up a thing we do a lot of work in, which is called prior learning assessment, which is where people can earn some college credit based on, learning that they have from their work experience and that sort of thing. So that's a way of recognizing and valuing what people bring to the table when they come back to school. There's the career transitions piece. You often have people, if they're returning to school, they already know, I want to work in this field, and I'm looking for this kind of direction. And so how can you help me narrow that down, get to where I need to go, connect me with employers, and let's go. So they're very demanding because they're not maybe walking in with no idea of what they want to do. And so those are some of the differences that come up when you're dealing with adult students. And of course, outreach is another principle. And that's, one of the key things that we mentioned before was marketing to adults is very, very different. And if your outreach is not inclusive of that audience, you will feel it. I mean, I think of it, and maybe it's because I have my own history and personal attachment to marketing. But I don't think marketing is just about selling things. Marketing is about so much more than that. And it's about communication, and it communicates whether you're an inclusive institution or you're not. And so there's that whole aspect of it, that if you say you're open access and you want to serve all of these kinds of students that maybe don't come from a situation that's privileged enough where they can live on campus and do those things, then you have to walk the talk, and then you have to also talk the walk, which is what the marketing piece is about.
So I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it, because higher ed, I've worked in it, and so I feel confident saying this doesn't really move fast. So
Yeah.
So if anything, I do feel that sometimes marketing can get ahead of the kind of follow through on campus. Do you see that as an issue where, maybe enrollment offices or communication marketing folk at higher ed realize like, oh, this is a target audience, like we did research and called in agencies, and we figured out, we have a huge target audience base of prospective students that, meet this non-traditional adult learning role. We need to start marketing. And then they start marketing, and then students come to campus, and it's, campus hasn't caught up to that push.
Yeah, it definitely requires coordination of those two things. But I've also seen the other side where campus is ready to go, and marketing is still using the previous, strategy that they had. So, but yes, you have to be careful of that. I think one of the things that I always counsel when talking to marketers about this is, or even if I'm holding a consulting session or something that usually has marketers and academics and others in the room, is, the call to action is really where it's at. I mean, you know that in marketing, right? The call to action is where the rubber meets the road. So getting to that conversation about what is our call to action, where are we sending them, who's going to talk to them, what are they going to say, are they going to say the right things, is this going to align with our campaign? So yeah, you really have to dig into like what happens at that point, because yeah, I've seen situations where you can have thousands of students go to a thing, but if nobody knows how to talk to them or responds to them in the right way, that's just kind of a lost opportunity. So it has to involve the enrollment folks, admissions folks, advisors, like everybody has to be part of the process, as well as marketing, in order to make that work. And it's also like, part of the marketing planning, that has to be a discussion as well, is what is our percentage kind of target? Do we want to be 95% traditional age students and that's how we want to spend our marketing dollars? Or do we see ourselves as a 50-50 combination? What does that do with our budget, in terms of, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to be 50-50, but we're going to have one program for adults and we're going to throw $20,000 at it, for marketing, and that's it. That's not going to get you to 50%. So, all those things have to be weighed when you're thinking about that.
An interesting example that I just heard from a colleague at another institution was that they, they work in the communication marketing office. They engaged with a user on social media, that, had just talked about that he had not been able to complete his degree requirements. Like he was like a couple classes short, it just had never worked with his credit, or the way his schedule was structured. And he had never heard about the, I forget what the official title is, but it was one of those kind of create your own program where you combine a couple of disciplines and build a program that may not exactly exist within the traditional disciplines of that school. But he had never heard about it. So this man had been floating around in the systems for who knows how long, like not like, I don't want to say it was like 2 credits away, but something similar where you needed 3 more classes or another section of co-op or internship, and you just couldn't make it work with your schedule. And yet there was this program that felt like a stone's throw away, yet no one had made that connection, whether it was his advisor or, just there was not, that piece was not drawn for him. And when he found out, it was like a light bulb. And I mean, he's going through the process to figure out how that type of program, is there something that can get him a bachelor's at the end of the day? And, he's been working for years. So you would think again, kind of like to your point earlier, that credit experience transition, what counts as what. And so it's interesting, like they do have to all be on board. And, otherwise you have those moments that are missed and you have a student sitting there that could be, a graduate of your program and just continues to not be able to complete their degree for whatever reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those programs that you're talking about, like adult degree completion programs, so there are these degrees out there. That's what I went to. There are these degree programs out there that are specifically structured for adult learners. But the marketing budget that's allocated to that doesn't necessarily correspond with the amount of students that they either desire to pull in or have already pulled in. And so then it becomes like the best kept secret, kind of hiding within the institution. And so, I often ask this question, when in terms of thinking about the marketing budget. Do you even know how many students you have right now who are over the age of 25? Even if you just pulled that number real quick, and you may have also numbers about who's financially independent, who's attending part-time, right? If you pulled all that, what percentage of your actual student population is that right now? And is that the percentage of the marketing budget that's allocated to reaching that group? Because it kind of makes sense that those should align, right?
Minimum.
Right. Oftentimes that's not what you find, and then that's why people can't find it. And another thing that I've talked to a lot of institutions about too is if you have people, there's a process when somebody doesn't re-enroll. Typically there's like an outreach process with the student, and then there's a point where they give up, right? Um, and they say, okay, they're not going to re-enroll. Well, why not market those programs to those people who never re-enrolled? Because by now, maybe it's been a couple of years and they're out working and they just think they can't do it. And they don't, that's a perfect target audience. It's a list you already own that you could be marketing those programs to.
I love that idea. I mean, as someone who doesn't hold grudges, but can definitely get a bitter taste in your mouth. A few years also gives you that time to kind of like think, okay, well, maybe they've gotten better. And so I would almost welcome, at that point, like, hey, not like oh, I'm sorry we messed up, but, just kind of here, we were looking, or, we want to make sure that you are aware of all the possibilities. Once what insert college student, always a name of college student type of thing. So other like with marketing enrollment, kind of how do you see like people growing in that space? So I know mailers and other things, making sure people can see themselves or find the information that they need. But what are some of the other ways that schools and enrollment marketing efforts can really step up to make sure that they're and properly articulating the resources and programming available to non-traditional students and adult learners?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I think a first step is to develop some adult student personas, right? So, if you feel like your messaging is around traditional student personas, you really need to think through those personas so you can do the right messaging. So even if you had a list like the one we just talked about, um, you know, having a good persona to be able to say to them, hey, we know sometimes life gets in the way and our traditional programming isn't convenient. You had a job, we understand and we're cool with it. That's why we have this other, you know what I mean? But just sort of acknowledging and not putting it in this context of like, oh, you didn't re-enroll. And so thinking through those personas, I think is very, very important. The other part that is really important is, of course, your digital marketing strategy, and particularly, when you think about search engine optimization and those kinds of things. Adult students or potential adult students are going to be looking online. I mean, that's what they're going to do. They're going to Google it. They're not going on campus tours. They're not, you know what I mean? So how are you going to capture those leads, and not just capture them, but then be able to kind of have the right response or the right follow-up or thing for them to do next. So maybe they're not going to do an in-person campus visit, but they might do a virtual one. So thinking about how you do that is an important part as well. It looks like we might have frozen a little bit. Are you still there? Hello. Well, I guess it's just me. I'm just going to send her a message. right. Looks like she is signing back in. So we'll give her a minute.
Hello.
Hi.
That was Google. Google just booted us.
Oh, did they?
Yep, we are back, I think. Let me double. I want to make sure that it's still working on the site really quickly, but I'm pretty sure we're still good. But no, I heard all about different things like that. So I wrapped up before
You're still kind of cutting out.
Google
I'm
booted
sorry.
us off.
Okay.
All right. I think you still can. Let me. I'm trying to figure out what's happening here. All right. Okay. So, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. You break up a little bit, but yeah.
Okay, okay, perfect.
You break up a little bit, but gotta wait for the echo to wear off. Are you still there? Because I think you're frozen again.
So,
okay.
Back in, I think we should still be good everywhere. But
okay.
So kind of in the same vein as you were talking about, you know, the elements pulling together virtual tours and things like that. I think another benefit of those that people don't always necessarily realize is that when you think about these inclusive and accessible resources, and even though they might be developed for one particular target audience, there's always people within other audiences that are still going to appreciate them. So like a traditional age student, but lives in another country, can't come to campus for a campus tour. So, you know, you may have a virtual tour that already exists for that particular student, but, you know, slightly tweaking it or creating a route that maybe crosses paths with the on-campus childcare center or something like that, just adding in, you know, just small moments to pre-existing content, or when you're building out content, thinking about, okay, yes, we're building this for a target audience, but how can we make it, you know, applicable to more than just this particular area? What are some of the other kind of things that you've seen schools doing well that have really kind of like a good example? We don't have to reveal names, but something that really just seemed to be a thoughtful approach to this type of marketing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think part of it is thinking about those subgroups, as you mentioned, about, you know, adult learners. That's a big group. So even when you're talking about personas, it's not just the persona of an adult learner, but they kind of break up into different categories. You know, some people are, you know, kind of career accelerators. They're going rapidly through, they've been in marketing forever and they want their marketing degree, and you know what I mean? And they want out. And then other people are there to, you know, explore, to change careers. They want to go a totally different direction. They were a nurse and they hate nursing and they want to go in a totally different direction. That's a different kind of person. And then there's, of course, life circumstances, people working full-time, people who are full-time moms, you know, those are all those kinds of things to take into consideration. And then, you know, there are, of course, other factors as well, like international students, refugees, and you know, all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, you definitely want to kind of break your audience into subgroups too, and think about who you can appeal to there. And then I think in terms of schools that have done it well, you know, from a marketing perspective, quite honestly, some of the for-profits have this lockdown fairly well. You know, and I saw, you know, if you think about, you know, what might be on a DeVry website, or, you know, and I think it's interesting to take a note of exactly what they're doing and how they're talking about their students. And they're not all for-profits. Southern New Hampshire University also is a nonprofit, but has a huge, you know, online contingent of students, and they do a pretty good job about marketing. And you know, I think they have a campaign, right, where they've got like a bus tour that goes around to like their online students.
Yep.
And
That's what I was thinking of immediately. I was like, that's
yeah.
like, even, I mean, I just get always weepy when I see it. I'm like, oh, this really makes me so happy that that an institution really identified that this was a need that existed
Yeah.
and that they cared enough to go out and deliver it really makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good ad. And and it's a great school. But then there's also, I was thinking, one that I saw that was really cool. I think it was, I think it might have been Strayer, but they did like a viral campaign where they put up like a chalkboard in Central Park and like asked people to like write their dreams or what they things that they didn't do and then things that that they dream of doing, and it was like this whole concept. It was very, very aspirational and went all around the social media, and it was inclusive. These were people people from all different walks of life who still had those kinds of dreams for education and that sort of thing, and so it made that transparent, which was fun. So there's a lot of good stuff out there that you can look at for sure.
And I'm an actionable type of person, and so at the beginning of our talk, I think, and to end out, I think the conversation as we get close to 2 o'clock, you mentioned, looking at percentage of students versus percentage of budget spent towards, adult learning students. What are some other ways people that have tuned in from the show that are now kind of fired up, thinking, I know we have adult learners, or that this is something that my school is either maybe dabbling in but not doing great, or just is not paying attention to, and we need to start focusing. What are some quick ways to really get, again, just kind of start to sink your teeth in and figure out kind of, what does it look like on my campus, and what could I possibly maybe do to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, well, of course, this depends on the individual college and like what your reach is. Are you a national online university or are you regional? But if you're regional and you're thinking about commuter students, I think just looking at your media plan through a totally different lens. So, like we talked about that stack of direct mail pieces, right? It's like you get a list, here's everybody who's 18, boom, it goes out. Um, but what about thinking about that differently? So you could do research and find out whether there's zip codes or census tracts that have um, high populations of people who have some college but no degree.
Mm-hmm.
Or who graduated high school but have a very low college degree attainment. That might be your perfect target market, actually, from a physical location perspective. And then there's, of course, looking at things like radio or Pandora, or, if you're doing any of those kinds of ads, because you can get really, pretty targeted with that, thinking about a totally different age group than maybe what you've thought about in the past. The online piece of this, if you are doing Google AdWords campaigns or search engine optimization, what are those keywords that you're looking at? And that can make a big difference, I think, in terms of who you draw to your website. And then I really think thinking through, like, probably most low-hanging fruit is thinking through those people that you already have their contact info.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be the right fit to return as an adult student, with a new program offering. And just really thinking through all of those possibilities. Not just maybe people who, dropped out, but what about, or stopped out is a nicer term. Yeah. But also, what about the people if you're a four-year institution, what about the people who never finished at the community college down the street, or people who took the certificate program there, or all the people who are doing continuing ed at the community college, right? People might have done, I don't know, HVAC or welding, but now, maybe they want to do something else with their career. So, just really thinking about where you might be able to get access to other lists and stuff that you could start to test messages with and see where it leads.
I just was thinking like the certificate programs that a lot of, schools will offer their own staff members. It's not a full degree or anything. It's like a leadership certificate or something. And so I always think of those, like, these people that complete all of them. And I remember wondering, why don't you go back full time, not full time, but and complete a degree? You've taken all of the leadership certificates, like, a master's or an undergraduate in leadership or something like that. And then usually what they would respond with is that, oh, I don't have time to go back full time. Or I'm like, oh, you've completed the certificate like one every year. It seems like it, and I think that would be just an incredible possibility. A list of people that on your campus already, and talk about giving back to your own community. People that choose to work and spend their lives with your community already. It just seems like would be a natural fit. But we're coming up on the end of our time here. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you, Beth, for joining me today and sticking out through our technical issues this afternoon.
No problem.
And thanks to our viewers, as always, and M. Stoner for making this web show happen. I'm Erin Spinka signing off. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and enjoy your upcoming weekend.
Thank you.